This denial of a future leads the desperate into the arms of those who promise miracles and dreams of apocalyptic glory. Donald Trump does not herald the collapse of democracy. He heralds the ripping away of the veneer that masks the rot within the ruling structures and their pretense of democracy. He is the symptom, not the disease. The loss of basic democratic norms began long before Trump. Deindustrialization, deregulation, austerity, unchecked predatory corporations, including the healthcare industry, wholesale surveillance of every American, social inequality, an electoral system defined by legalized bribery, endless and futile wars, the largest prison population in the world, and the feelings of betrayal, stagnation, and despair, combined in a toxic brew that has culminated in inchoate and justified hatred of the ruling class. And the Democrats are as guilty as the Republicans. Trump and his coterie of billionaires, generals, half-wits, Christian fascists, criminals, racists, and moral deviants play the role of the Snopes clan in some of William Faulkner's novels I wrote in America, The Farewell Tour. The Snopeses filled the power vacuum of the decayed South and ruthlessly seized control from the degenerated former slaveholding aristocratic elites. Flem Snopes and his extended family, which includes a killer, a pedophile, a bigamist, an arsonist, a mentally disabled man who copulates with a cow, and a relative who sells tickets to witness the bestiality, are fictional representations of the scum now elevated to the highest level of the federal government. They embody the moral decay unleashed by unfettered capitalism. The usual reference to amorality, while accurate, is not sufficiently distinctive and by itself does not allow us to place them as they should be placed in a historical moment the critic Irving Howe wrote of the Snopeses. Perhaps the most important thing to be said is that they are what comes afterwards, the creatures that emerge from the devastation with the slime still upon their lips. Let a world collapse in the South or Russia, and there appear figures of coarse ambition, driving their way up from beneath the social bottom, men to whom moral claims are not so much absurd as incomprehensible, sons of bushwhackers or muziks drifting in from nowhere and taking over through the sheer outrageousness of their monolithic force, Howe writes. They become presidents of local banks and chairmen of party regional committees, and later, a trifle slicked up, they muscle their way into Congress or the Politburo, scavengers without inhibition. They need not believe in the crumbling official code of their society. They need only learn to mimic its sounds. The political philosopher Sheldon Wolin called our system of governance inverted totalitarianism, one that kept the old iconography, language, symbols, but had handed the internal levers of power to corporations and the rich. Now we are shifting to totalitarian's more recognizable form, one dominated by a demagogue and an ideology grounded in our homegrown Christian fascism. We live in a two-tiered legal system, one where poor people are harassed, arrested, and jailed for absurd infractions, such as selling loose cigarettes, which led to Eric Garner being choked to death by the New York City police in 2014, while crimes of appalling magnitude by the oligarchs and corporations, from oil spills to bank fraud in the hundreds of billions of dollars, which wiped out 40% of the world's wealth, are dealt with through tepid administrative controls, symbolic fines, and civil enforcement that give these wealthy perpetrators immunity from criminal prosecution, I wrote in America, the Farewell Tour. The utopian ideology of neoliberalism and global capitalism is a vast con, a mechanism to funnel wealth upwards to the billionaire class. The working poor, whose unions and rights were stripped from them and whose wages have stagnated or declined over the past 40 years, have been disempowered and impoverished. Their lives, as Barbara Ehrenreich chronicled in Nickel and Dimed, are one long, stress-ridden emergency. The middle class is evaporating. Cities that once manufactured products and offered factory jobs are boarded up wastelands. The destruction is a ruse. Corporations, the destruction of trade barriers is a ruse corporations and the billionaire class use to stash $1.42 trillion in profits in overseas banks to avoid paying taxes. The labels liberal and conservative are meaningless, evidenced by a Democratic presidential candidate who turned to Wall Street bankers to formulate her economic policies and bragged about an endorsement from Dick Cheney, a war criminal who left office with a 13% approval rating. Fascism is always the bastard child of a bankrupt liberalism. The attraction of Trump is that, although vile and buffoonish, he mocks the political charade. Trump lies like he breathes, but the lies told by the two establishment parties caused far more pain and did far more damage than the lies told by Trump. Trump is merely the apotheosis of a culture of mendacity, deception, and exploitation, for we are a culture awash in lies. It no longer matters what is true, it matters only what is correct. The correct ideology of neoliberalism is as delusional as the correct ideology of the Christian fascists. Neither are reality-based belief systems. Totalitarianism elevates the brutal and the stupid, those with no genuine political philosophy other than a lust for wealth and power. Empty, mind-numbing cliches and slogans, most of which are absurd and contradictory, replace political discourse. And this is as true for the Christian right as it is for those who preach free market economics and globalization. The illusions peddled on our screens, including the fictitious persona created for Trump on The Apprentice, have replaced reality. Politics is burlesque, as Kamala Harris's vapid, celebrity-filled, issueless campaign illustrated. It is smoke and mirrors created by an army of agents, publicists, marketing departments, promoters, pollsters, script writers, wardrobe consultants, and public announcers. Our money-drenched, heavily managed elections are little more than totalitarian plebiscites designed to give a veneer of legitimacy to oligarchic and corporate power. The political malaise is mirrored in a cultural malaise, what Soren Kierkegaard calls a sickness unto death, the numbing of the soul by nihilism. The cult of the self dominates our cultural landscape. I wrote An Empire of Illusion. This cult has within it the classic traits of psychopaths: superficial charm, grandiosity, and self-importance, a need for constant stimulation, a penchant for lying, deception, and manipulation, and the inability to feel remorse or guilt. This is, of course, the ethic promoted by corporations. It is the ethic of unfettered capitalism. It is the misguided belief that personal style and personal advancement, mistaken for individualism, are the same as democratic equality. In fact, personal style, defined by the commodities we buy or consume, has become a compensation for our loss of democratic equality. We have a right in the cult of the self to get whatever we desire. We can do anything, even belittle and destroy those around us, including our friends, to make money, to be happy, to become famous. Once fame and wealth are achieved, they become their own justification, their own morality. How one gets there is irrelevant. Once you get there, those questions are no longer asked. My book, Empire of Illusion, begins in Madison Square Garden at a World Wrestling Entertainment Tour. I understood that professional wrestling was the template for our social and political life, but I did not know that it would produce a president, and soon a secretary of education, who has vowed to shut the department down. The bouts are stylized rituals I wrote in what could have been a description of a Trump rally. They are public expressions of pain and a fervent longing for revenge, the lurid and detailed sagas behind each bout, rather than the wrestling matches themselves, are what drive crowds to a frenzy. These ritualized battles give those packed in the arenas a temporary, heady release from mundane lives. The burden of real problems is transformed into fodder for a high-energy pantomime. It is not going to get better. The tools to shut down dissent have been cemented into place. Our democracy cratered years ago. All Trump has to do to establish a naked police state is flip a switch, and he will. The worse reality becomes, the less a beleaguered population wants to hear about it, I wrote at the conclusion of Empire of Illusion, and the more it distracts itself with squalid pseudo-events of celebrity breakdowns, gossip, and trivia. These are the debauched revels of a dying civilization. The system is not reformable. Either we obstruct in the only form left to us, which is mass mobilization, acts of sustained civil disobedience, especially the strike, or we are frog-marched into serfdom.